So there are a couple of historical aspects that I want to go over. It is a game based off of history, and the point of the game is for you to relive history or make history by either going the same route as these countries did back all those years ago, or taking the alternate history route. It's really your choice. That's one of the great things about this game. There are some historical aspects that I think should be covered. For example, Serbia. Serbia must be invaded on the first turn by Austria-Hungary. By Austria-Hungary. They have to. It is a part of the rules. Whether they take Serbia or not, that's up to how many troops they commit, or just up to the die rolls. It does not matter. It's history. It's alternate history. Another historical aspect is the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire is extremely weak in this game. It's called the Ottoman Empire for a reason, because it existed at that time, and it has existed for hundreds of years. It's known as the sick man of Europe. However, around the third turn, Great Britain very often takes out this faction from the game. And a lot of times, taking out this faction can sway the game in favor of the Allies. They have very few troops, very poor income, and for this to be an empire, but yet has an income about the size of Italy, which is just a tiny country, shows just how weak the Ottoman Empire is. You have colonies, European colonies, like German colonies going against British colonies, but the British have more men down here in Africa because the British have a way bigger empire. That's a historical aspect that I think should be covered. Once again, Russia holds Poland, making it the Russian Empire. They got hella momentum on their side. The Russian Empire is not really weak, but despite the momentum that they have at the beginning of the game, it doesn't really last long. But just like in actual history, the Russian Empire only had good momentum for about the first year. Around the second year was when they ended up reeling from the German army. Germany has the biggest army. As you can see, where most armies only have 2 artillery, Germany, on the other hand, has 3 artillery for every army that it has. An example, France has 6 infantry, 2 artillery here, 6 infantry and 2 artillery here, 6 infantry and 2 artillery here. And in Paris, 6 infantry and 2 artillery. That's like the standard army here. You look at the army in England, 6 infantry and 2 artillery. That's like the standard army here. Even the United States has the same setup. But Germany, who has the biggest military, has, 7 infantry and 3 artillery. And that's like the standard for all German armies. That just comes to show that Germany was top dog in Europe. They had the biggest production, the most factories. Germany was so dominant, they even tried to rival England in naval production, even invented submarines. Now, if you look at the board, Germany is set up to invade France, like they did historically. Germany's objective was to invade France, knock it out of the war, and move on to Russia in the east. Of course, that's not what happened. France ended up holding out against Germany. And, So, in 1871, France and Germany got into a war. Bigger than a conflict. It was a war. It's called the Franco-Prussian War. The German state of Prussia, which is around this area, had united several German states and invaded France because they had gotten into a conflict. They pushed their way to Paris, which is right here, and France had to surrender. They lost territory, had to pay a lot of money, long story short, and were just overall humiliated. So they spent the next few decades after that reforming their military, making new weapons, making alliances like that of Russia to challenge the Germans. The Germans, who were already challenging every other nation in military, production, navy, were pretty much, they were top dogs. And Otto von Bismarck, the German chancellor, had made it of high importance to maintain an alliance with Russia. However, after he died, German leadership that came along down the road failed to keep good relations with Russia, and France ended up getting Russia to be their ally, which screwed the Germans over. Instead of fixing it, the Germans decided to invent a plan called the Schlieffen Plan, where they would invade France, knock them out of the war, and then turn their attention to their most formidable foe, the bear in the east. They had an alliance with Austria-Hungary, so that was really cool. That worked out in their favor. Austria would hold off Russia. Germany would invade France. And you know how the plan goes. France decided to have an offensive war against Germany. They knew they had to keep up the offensive on Germany because Germany was a bigger country, bigger military, and they knew that if they wanted to have a war, they would have to have that specific war, that conflict on German soil. So they judged that an offensive war was the best way to go. So all French units, no matter where they are, invaded Germany. Across the Franco-German border, like in the previous war. Everything. Basically. So basically all French units crossed the Franco-German border. Germany had a plan to hold off the French in this region, but then invade Belgium, sweep through Belgium, and take the French army from behind. So imagine all of these units, all of these German units, even the huge German armies of like 13 men, 13 soldiers and 3 artillery pieces. That's a huge stack right there. Imagine that, all sweeping through Belgium and taking the French army from behind. They would either crush the French army or make the French army surrender, and then Paris would be within, arm's reach. Maybe Paris would surrender. It was supposed to be a quick victory. Truth is, the plan was overambitious. Long story short, it was wishful thinking on Germany's part, and they were too busy trying to soldier through all of their diplomatic problems that they did not at all conduct diplomacy in the way that they needed to. That's why they lost Russia to the French. Anyway, that was the overall Schlieffen Plan. It didn't at all pan out like that. It ended up being trench warfare. We all know how it is. Any history buff should know what I'm talking about. But that's just for the game. The United States comes into the war on the third turn. They cannot move past this sea zone until the third round. But if Germany is feeling up to it, they can declare unrestricted submarine warfare. And any submarine they have in sea zone 2, 7, or 8. These 3 sea zones. they can take one die and they could roll it, and whatever number lands on that die lands on is how many IPCs they can take away from the United States or England. They get to choose. And they have submarines up here too, but these submarines are more for the English, the blockade of England. But let's not forget now, England has the biggest navy. They have a navy right here at home, have a small little navy over there in Canada, and they got a navy right there under the Gulf of Arabia. France got colonies. Granted, if Germany does declare unrestricted submarine warfare against the United States can get involved right from the get-go. They can do whatever they want. France can take a soldier and land them in a allied country. And once you land in that allied country, you get, well, a bonus of troops. That bonus of troops, well, you get twice the IPC number. So Portugal is worth 2 IPCs. So double, twice, 2 times 2. Well, that's 4. They get 4 units. One of them is an artillery piece. So these units would get put on the board, and France would have the opportunity to transport those units to the front line. That's the whole point of allied countries. For example, Serbia. Serbia is an allied country. Technically an allied country of Russia. So if the Central Powers invade that country, they get to put units there. And that country fights for them. Or let's say Russia chooses to move into Romania. They can activate that allied country. Romania has an IPC count of 3. So they would get 6 units. 5 infantry, 1 artillery. And before you know it, you have a whole new army right there. Italy can land in Albania. Turkey can land in Bulgaria and cop those extra units. Any neutral country like Switzerland that is invaded, Switzerland does not have an allied country marker next to it, so therefore it is neutral. Spain, neutral. Sweden, Norway, even Persia, which the English have to get past to get into the Ottoman Empire. They're neutral. They're all neutral. So that's an example of neutral countries. That's an example of allied countries like Belgium. If Belgium is invaded, France can commandeer it. Or if France moves into Belgium, they can commandeer those units for themselves. That's how allied countries work. I'm not going to get started on the chart down here. The chart is very sloppy, if you ask me. It's simple, but it's sloppy. I personally don't like it. This is basically all the historical aspects I wanted to go over regarding this game. Just the historical aspects. That's really all I have to say regarding this video. Stay tuned for more strategies, really. I'm going to do mini videos based off of strategies.